It's Charter Local Edition. Brad Pomerance here in West Los Angeles. We're joined by Bill Brand. He is a member of the Redondo Beach City Council. He's announced his intention to run for mayor of that city. I'd like to speak with you about development. It's always a very controversial topic. There is a development that's been proposed in the King Harbor area known as Center Cal. Without giving away the ending, what is the development?
Well, it's a large increase in development. Right now there's about 225,000 square feet of development on the ground. This would increase it to 525,000 square feet, more than double it. Raise the height of buildings, put buildings, 3-story, 45-foot tall buildings where there are no buildings, blocking the view of the public from the westernmost road, which is Harbor Drive. Going to put in a movie theater, very large movie theater, 700-seat movie theater, another hotel, lots of retail.
Any residential?
No residential.
Commercial?
No, commercial.
Could be exciting. Could be an exciting development, but you have some serious concerns.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd like to see a revitalization of our waterfront, no question about it. There's a phrase going around called revitalize, not supersize.
Okay.
And myself and many others would characterize this as a supersizing. But yes, we need a public-private partnership that is good for both the community and the developer that revitalizes the waterfront. But what we have here is a mall developer, Center Cal Properties. They build malls, and unfortunately we've engaged someone who builds malls, and that's what they're putting in King Harbor, and caused a lot of controversy.
So let's talk through the process. It's interesting for government nerds like us. So about 6 years ago, Measure G was before the voters in Redondo Beach. It passed. It allows for this form of development or redevelopment. But now the Measure G has passed, certain hurdles need to be jumped through. The first is the developer has to go to the Harbor Commission, which is essentially the Planning Commission. What did the Redondo Beach Harbor Commission say?
Well, the Harbor Commission approved it 4-2.
Okay.
Yeah, and then it was appealed to the City Council.
So that's the next layer.
And that's the next layer.
And there's 5 members of the City Council. You're one of the 5, but you didn't vote.
No.
Why did you not vote?
I recused myself. It's a quasi-judicial process where you're supposed to go into it with an open mind, much like a jury operates in a criminal trial or civil trial. But I, after everything I had learned and understood and wanted for our waterfront, I couldn't go into that with an open mind. I had already clearly made up my mind that this was way too big and was going to violate the California Environmental Quality Act, our local coastal program, the Coastal Act
itself. Isn't that why you got elected, so you can speak your mind and vote on projects the way you see them? Is it because of the method that it was brought to the City Council?
No, and I did express my views all throughout, writing editorials in the paper and things, whatever I could, wherever I could, in town halls. But when you go into a process, this is a different process. This is not a legislative process.
I understand.
This is a quasi-judicial process.
And that was your concern.
Yeah, and normally you do go into them with you do have open minds and you remain open-minded. But when you don't, can't go into it with an open mind, you need to recuse yourself.
So the City Council upheld the Harbor Commission vote on a 3-1 because you did not vote.
Would have been 3-2.
3-2, but be that as it may. Now there's an appeal before the California Coastal Commission because it's in the coastal zone. How does that process work?
Well, the first thing they have to do is declare that there's a substantial issue. It's kind of wonky stuff. And then if they determine there's a substantial issue, then they'll do a full appeal hearing, a de novo, what they call start from scratch, and look at the whole project as a whole. And so that's what we've done. We've appealed to the California Coastal Commission for them to hear the project as a whole. So I just came from there in Ventura arguing that they should hear our appeal.
As a general proposition, does the Coastal Commission tend to accept these types of appeals?
Yeah, it's a large project. There is substantial issue. We feel they violated the Coastal Act. We feel they violated our own local coastal program. And I think they'll agree with us and look at it and adjust the project as needed to make it compliant.
So let us presume the Coastal Commission does take the project. What's the timeline for something like this?
Well, they were supposed to hear substantial issue this month, but there's been some moving and grooving there, and so it looks like the developer has agreed to put that off. And so that's one of the arguments I was making today at the Coastal Commission. They should wait until the initiative, which we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah, we'll get there in a second.
Which is in March, and likely they will, because people are going to be voting in March.
Okay, so let's talk about March. There's an initiative on the ballot. I guess it's the stepchild or the child, whatever you want to call it, to Measure G. 6 years later, we now have, is it essentially a reversal of Measure G?
No, it gives Measure G a haircut, I'll say.
Do we have a letter yet? Do we have a letter for, is it Measure?
Well, actually, we voted to put it on the ballot last night.
Okay, and, so we don't know the letter yet.
It probably will be Measure C.
Okay, so that's the okay, so keep going.
Yeah, so Measure G, which passed 6 years ago, was a zoning for this area. It's very obscure. People didn't really understand it. The campaigning said things like save the seaside lagoon, limit heights, limit development. And so people wanted, like I was saying, want to see revitalization, and they want to see something happen. So it was passed. And unfortunately, though, this project came up, and when people saw the results of that zoning, there's a lot of controversy. People are not happy with it. I've been canvassing the various neighborhoods of Redondo, and I got to tell you, it's almost unanimous when we show pictures of the model that CenterCal made of the project that people are strongly opposed to.
And so the voters do have the legal right to overturn the votes of the Harbor Commission and the City Council? That is undeniable in your mind?
Well, they can certainly set the zoning, and that's what they're doing, and they're resetting the zoning. Well, frankly, the citizens can do almost anything. Yeah.
Okay, so let us presume that either the voters say no to this project or the Coastal Commission says no. What happens then?
Well, like I said, I'm looking forward to a public-private partnership.
Right. Okay, so what does that look like for you?
Well, I think CenterCal will have to rethink their approach to how they're going to redevelop.
Do they own the
Redondo.
land now?
No. CenterCal, actually, we're looking at entering into a long-term 99-year lease with them. But right now, we own the land. Well, we always will own the land, us and the state tidelands. So what would be the best approach, I think, is to not only look at this area, but look at the area over at the AS site, which is catty-corner to this, 50 acres. The power plant's going to come down. It's on the market for sale right now. I think we need to take a comprehensive view of our waterfront, since it's sitting right there. Look at it as a whole, let the community develop a vision and a zoning around that, and work with a developer in a private-public partnership, or maybe a couple of developers, to spread out the impacts, back up the commercial. Every developer I've talked to who's interested in buying the AS site points over to that plan and asks me, Bill, is that project going through?
Meaning the CenterCal project.
Right, because if it does go through, then any developer over at the AS site is just looking at a lot of residential. And so what you end up with is this piecemeal overdevelopment. What you really need to have is a comprehensive plan, a comprehensive rezoning that allows us to spread out the impact, put the open space and recreational uses down on the waterfront where they belong, and back up the commercial.
So let's presume that somehow, some way, CenterCal and the city of Redondo Beach come to a resolution, either because the voters tell them to or the Coastal Commission does. What's the timeline before we see some type of project to revitalize the waterfront?
Well, if everything goes CenterCal's way and our staff and City Council, narrow majority of City Council's way, I mean, you could see things starting to happen down there in 6 months.
Let's presume that there's an agreement. 6 months to a year. Let's say there's an agreement, but let's say there's an agreement.
Yeah.
So, there's this public-private partnership. How long will that take to hammer out?
It depends on what happens. If the scenario I talked about takes hold, it would probably be an extra year before things could unfold, but that's really the way it needs to go.
He is Bill Brand. He is a member of the Redondo Beach City Council. He has announced his intent to run for mayor of that beautiful city. My name is Brad Pomerance. You're joining us in West Los Angeles on Charter Local Edition.